Hey there guys, Redbeard. Today we got a little bit of news that the Thrones of Decay news hype train will be starting next week, so we might actually get the Thrones of Decay before the end of April, or at the very least at the beginning of May. So we've got news. The news today was mostly just about pricing. So there's going to be 3 individual packs for each race, Nurgle, Empire, Dwarves, which you can buy separately. And if you do buy like 2 separately, you'll get a if you buy one, just one, you'll get 15% discount on the remaining other 2 packs if you want to buy those later. Or you can buy all 3 as a bundle at €22.92, euros 1910. So I think that's awesome. Anything to lower the barrier of entry into a series as massive as this, with so many DLCs, multiple games. Anything to lower the barrier of entry at this point is going to help the longevity of this series. And we've been flooded with these rumors that like they've gone from 3 to 4 years, which honestly felt like a threat to the community just saying that. And now we're hearing these rumors of like there may only be 4 DLCs left. It's like, that would be so stupid. That would be so dumb. This is a cash cow. There's so much more content you could add. The modding dens, Discord, like their pictures, like the future of Warhammer 3 now, which I mean they definitely are. I don't know. I gotta support the game, but you know they gotta keep doing shit like this too, where they are continuing to do good by the community. Because if they pull another Shadows of Change or anything close, then as sad as it would be, the game should die. More layoffs coming for Creative Assembly through Sega. You know, we had something like 300 employees at the end of last year fired, and now it's looking like it could be a possibly 200 more employees, which still leaves 400 employees. Like, I don't know if they ever increased the size of the DLC team for Warhammer from like 20 to whatever since then. But even if they just kept 20 guys on it for like 10 more years, I think we could just keep getting content, and I would still pay for it at least. And I know there's a lot of people like me that are very invested in the series still, which, you know, was shaken a little bit with Shadows Change, but still invested, you know, that they're in a better place. Before we shift away from the current news and into the next part of the video, Legend of Total War said he had a leak that Epidemius is going to be the free Legendary Lord, and please no, please no. God, he would be such a better legendary hero, like the Blue Scribes, the Herald is for Tzeentch. You know, I guess Changeling is a Herald technically too, although he's kind of something else entirely. Anyways, but golly gee, there are just so many better Nurgle characters for a Legendary Lord, like Gut, Rot, Spume, but he deserves his own DLC. But the Glockin, you know, Valnir the Reaper could even work. A Horticulous Slimix would be a better Herald character for a Legendary Lord. Again, technically AOS, but also 40k, so he's already crossed over. I've rung this bell before, though. If Epidemius is going to be a Legendary Lord, then give him Horticulus's Molluscoid mount. That would make him a lot more worth it, in my opinion. Molluscoids would just be a great Nurgle unit. But I digress. So, shifting. I kind of tacked this news on to a video I had already recorded and was on the back burner, which is just my final Thrones of Decay predictions all in one spot, because I did a series where it was all spread out, so I thought maybe I'd just put it all in one spot before the hype train starts and we find out what we're actually getting. So, we got a little chart here for going left to right, Nurgle, Empire, Dwarves, and then from top to bottom, Legendary Lord, Legendary Hero, Generic Lord, Generic Hero, Mounts, Magic, then Units. We're just going to work our way through that. So starting with Tamercan, He will be the legendary lord, I'm sure. He is the maggot lord himself, and he is a literal maggot who will take over the bodies of humans, or more popularly, he has an ogre model, so like a Nurgleized ogre. Would probably be a melee powerhouse, and he has a toad dragon, which he will bring to the game for mount options. He has a unique one named Bubalos. Think like Dread Saurian sized. Might have like a breath attack as well, or some kind of like tongue shooting attack. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, he should focus on just like maybe taking Zen by Jin, fighting his like brothers or whatever, and then going maybe through the Dark Lands and over to the Empire, where he should famously fight Elspeth at Nuln, and maybe Grim Berluxen is in some way involved in that, obviously, for this DLC. Which Grim Berluxen, like, being in Nuln, per se, makes a lot of sense, because, there's a lot of dwarf engineers in the Empire and in Nuln, subsequently, as well. So, on to Elspeth von Draken. She would be a caster lord, like Balthazar, but she would be a death wizard, and she would ride a Carmine dragon, which is a dragon so soaked in death magic that it's, like, almost ethereal. So yeah, she's going to be an absolute powerhouse, in general. Maybe not so much in melee, but as a caster for sure. She might have some kind of mechanic where she focuses on like hunting, basically enemies of order, whether they be chaos or undead or otherwise. And moving on to Grim Berluxen, so he'd be our engineer lord for the dwarves. He would have a Grudge Raker shotgun. Maybe he'd have other weapon options, I don't know. Maybe he has some sort of like grenade ability, something like that, like a blasting charge. Hopefully he would get a some sort of unique mount along to match Tamerken and Elspeth. Maybe like a unique gyro bomber with like a crank gun on it, which is like a Gatling gun. Or some kind, like a straight up Drake gun, I don't know. Kaisk the Befouled, so going on to legendary heroes, Kaisk the Befouled is Tamerken's champion. Mainly he would bring Rot Knights into the game, which is the Monstrous Cavalry upgrade to Chaos Knights. But, he should be a very good fighter. Theodore Bruckner, also a very good fighter. He's a mountain of a man, riding a mountain of a demigryph. And Elspeth used him to eventually vanquish Tamerken. She gave him like this amulet, and she gave it to Theodore so he could because he was the only one that could get close enough to Tamerken. And then she set it off, and it killed Theodore and Tamerken and everyone around them. So Theodore should probably have some sort of like death ability. Tamerken should have a death ability as well. I forgot to mention. So Tamerken, like upon dying, should, be able to, basically the maggot slithers out of the ogre body, and maybe if any enemy lord or hero is in the vicinity, or in his proximity when he dies, Tamerken can just automatically hijack that enemy lord or hero, as long as they're maybe wounded already. Yeah, but Theodore Bruckner, upon death, would just go off like a nuke. Like, imagine the Skaven nuke, but when Theodore dies, boom. Something like that, just kills everything in his proximity. In a big bang. Now, Theodore and Kaisk are both the champions of their respective characters. And maybe there should be more of a distinction between legendary hero and champion going forward. Like, Henry Le Massif for Rapunzel Lyonesse is like a champion rather than a legendary hero to the whole race. He's just for that legendary lord. And I think Kaisk and Theodore should work in that same way. But, I mean, building on that, I think Epidemius and Jubilfalk actually make more sense as the advertised legendary hero. So Epidemius, when people say he should be a legendary lord, I just don't see it. Like, in tabletop, he is technically. For Total War, I think he just brings nothing to the table as a legendary lord and would be boring. He doesn't bring a new mount. We already have palanquins. Yeah. I honestly think that probably all the lesser demon characters for each monogod should probably just be legendary heroes at this point, now that the blue scribes are. And the more I think about that, the more it makes sense. So the other ones, so it's the blue scribes for Tzeentch, Epidemius for Nurgle, Azul the Skull Taker for Khorne, and Mask of Slaanesh for Slaanesh. The more I think about it, they all make more sense probably as legendary heroes. But yeah, Epidemius would be like a leadership battery, great Nurgle spellcaster. Maybe he's dual lore, so he has the lore of Nurgle and the lore of Death. That would make a lot of sense to me. It would just buff the absolute crap out of your Plague Bearers. And maybe other Nurgle units in your army too. But Jubilfalk for the Empire would be great for their race, because the Empire focuses a lot on gunpowder, from their riflemen to their cannons to their hell rocket batteries, all of it. Empire is known for that. That's a big part of their roster. So Jubilfalk, instead being the advertised legendary hero, would just make a lot of sense. He'd be, maybe he had different guns, like, rifles, repeaters, shotguns, pistols, you name it. For mounts, he should absolutely have the mecha horse. So it's like a robotic horse. It's loreful. It's such a meme. It needs to be in the game. And also maybe he could have a steam tank mount, because that would just be a nice upgrade. Now, for Dwarves legendary hero, Malachi Makaisen. I mean, he has to be the legendary hero. When people say he should be a legendary lord, just know he's an outcast slayer engineer. No. We already have a slayer lord. Grim Elixir will give us an engineer lord. Whereas a slayer engineer, works for both of those lords as a hero. Or to end, he would be great for any dwarf faction and army. Yeah, he would buff all your slayers, all your engineers. He would be pretty good in combat too. He would eventually get a Thunder Barge mount, a unique one called the Spirit of Grundy. And yeah, it would be... He has to, with the whole hint of like the toolbox, it's Malachi. Moving on. Generic Lord. So for Nurgle, we just need the melee Lord and the Sorcerer Hero that Nurgle's missing. For the Chaos Lord, he just should be a melee powerhouse, really, really tanky, lots of health, lots of weapon strength. And then lots of mounts. So Chaos Steed of Nurgle, Chaos Chariot of Nurgle, Rock Beast, and then eventually Toad Dragon. And I'm forgetting Rotfly. He should also have a Rotfly. All of those. Grand Wizard for the Empire. Now this one's probably the most interesting. So we just need the Wizard Lord for the Empire. Now, lorefully though, Magister, what the name is, maybe it's like Supreme Magister or Arch Magister, maybe would be the name. But so wizards for the Empire are pretty like rare. You have to go to a college to learn magic. So I think we need a rework to magic, or how we get our wizards in the Empire race. So maybe like Marcus Wolfhard and Volkmar don't even have access because they're not in the Empire. But when you're in the Empire, it essentially works like the Ice Court. So you would get all your Wizard Lords and Wizard Heroes from this Colleges of Magic Ice Court-esque mechanic. And this would help you really tailor your wizard, and you have to like spend, 8 turns building the wizard, learning in the Colleges of Magic before you can get them. And then, lords like Elspeth and Balthazar Geld would get grander buffs to their Colleges of Magic mechanic than other lords, obviously. But yeah, the Wizard Lords should have all 8 lores, and I also think that all 8 lords should have unique mounts. So like, the Celestial Hurricanum for Lore of Heavens, the Carmine Dragon for the Lore of Death, and so on and so forth. So moving on to the Dwarves, Guild Lord Engineers. So these would be just like a generic version of Grim Berlichson. They'd have maybe an assortment of different weapons they could have, grudge rakers, rifles, you name it, crank guns maybe even, or drake guns, gyrocopter mounts or juggernaut mounts could be cool. So moving on, I already pretty much talked about the Chaos Sorcerer of Nurgle, just a generic hero, Lords of Nurgle, Lore of Death probably, Chaos Steed of Nurgle mount, Chaos Warshrine of Nurgle mount. Moving on to the Empire, Master Engineer. So this would basically be generic Jubilfalk. Different gun options, much also like the Dwarf Master Engineer. Just an Empire version of that. Mecha Horse and Steam Tank mounts. For the Dwarves Hero, just Dragon Slayer. Because we have Malachi McKyson here, we just need more Slayer stuff. Dragon Slayer Hero makes a lot of sense here. Just an unarmored, crazed, killing machine of a hero. Now, on to mounts. So for Nurgle, Rot Beasts, Toad Dragons, those new mounts would be great. As I've already talked about, for the Empire, I think all of the Wizard Lords, at least, could have unique ones, like the Celestial Hurricanum. And, as I already talked about, Steam Tank would be nice, too, as a mount. For the Dwarves, Engineers really need to start getting, like, gyrocopters as mount options. And there's also the Juggernaut, which I will talk about more, but it's basically, it could either be a single entity Steam Tank or more of a artillery chariot like Empire's War Wagons. For Magic, this is not applicable for Nurgle because I don't think they necessarily need more lores, and Dwarves are Dwarves, so no. Empire, though, obviously should get the Gold Wizard, Hero for the Metal lore, and then all the 8 lores for their lords. Moving on to units. Nurgle should get Rot Knight. So again, monstrous cavalry. Kind of like the size of Mournfang, but like a Nurgle version. So maybe a little slower, but also will debuff the enemy in melee combat. Toad Dragons are like a Dreadsaurian size unit that are flightless, mind you. But, they might have a breath attack or like a tongue shooting attack. They might have some sort of AoE, like damage over time thing, kind of like Jabber Scythe. They'd be, again, Dreadsaurian sized, so huge. One of the biggest, they should be one of the biggest units in the game, and should probably be locked to having 1 Toad Dragon per province at recruited at tier 5. Bile Trolls are trolls. They probably work like river trolls, where they have debuff aura or in melee. But the real difference here is that they have a vomit attack, so a ranged attack. Whether it works just as a missile, like innately, or a bound vomit is to be determined. Either way, that ranged attack really set them apart. Pestigores and Plague Bowls, so definitely can get Pestigores. With the whole Centigores of Tzeentch thing, who knows what they'll do for Nurgle, but I'm sure there'll be another Beastman unit. You know, with the Centigores of Tzeentch, it's like they took the Beastman roster, put it up on a wall, blindfolded a guy, and just threw a dart. Because Centigores are really more of a Slanesh thing. Plague Bowls just makes the most sense to me, but who knows what it'll be. Either way, Pestigores and Plague Bowls will be... They'll probably have some kind of ability equivalent to the Arcane Surge that the Tzeentch units get. Maybe it's called Pestilent Surge. You know, when an enemy caster, or when your caster is casting, maybe you just get extra weapon strength and whatnot. Putrid Slugs are our bonus unit here. You know, they would just be really thematic with the whole Maggot Lord thing. They may not be loreful, technically, but... So, I just imagine them working like Morngulls, where they're like this stealthy, monstrous unit with, you know, some decent maneuverability. Which would be awesome on the Nurgle roster. Awesome. And they might have an animation where they kind of go in and out of the ground, like digging, like the Tomb Scorpion does. So also might have a lot of disruption for enemy infantry, which would be pretty interesting for the Nurgle roster. Moving on to Empire units. The Celestial Hurricanum would be a lot like the Whooshing Compass, where it has these buffs to nearby allies, but also has bound spells, which, you know, any spells from the Lore of Heavens makes sense. It also is like a similar model to the Luminarch of Hysh, so having some kind of shooting attack would be very nice to make it really a substantial unit. I think it could work like this mod I played, where it essentially uses the Doom Wheel attack, where if just any enemy is in proximity, the Celestial Hurricanum will just randomly shoot out bolts of lightning. So it's just, you know, just like an AoE kind of targeting thing. It's not something you necessarily aim. Then we're moving on to the Hawkland Long Rifles, which could be a carbon copy of Jezzail's, like the Crane Gunners were. Or maybe they, like, sit the rifle on a bipod instead, so they don't have a shield, but they have more range and accuracy instead. And then maybe Null Ironsides are like an ROR version of that are more heavily armored and have like a charge defense of some sort. Maybe they have like bayonets and heavier armor. The repeater volley guns. So whether these would work more like a semi-automatic or a shotgun, either way they should feel like an upgrade to handgunners. And yeah, so shorter range, more damage, more volume of fire, and then give us a mounted version, so like Outriders, but with these repeater volley guns. And then onto Hellhammer Cannon. So Hellhammers are actually ships strapped with great cannons, siege ships, but in the Empire there are cannons of all varying sizes, from, you know, the quote-unquote great cannons, which are just the regular cannon unit we have in game, all the way up to Ulrich's Thunder, which is a titanic cannon that literally needs to be loaded by a giant. Yeah, so it is massive. So I just envision I just borrowed the name Hellhammer Cannon, you know, I just imagine it as like maybe a Queen Bess sized cannon, or maybe smaller, like a little Grom-sized cannon. Just a mega cannon like that for the Empire makes a lot of sense alongside this DLC. And then maybe it could even be strapped onto the Marienburg land ship. Now, that's what I'm using for the bonus unit, because I kind of see it as more of a Dogs of War unit than an Empire unit, per se. But it also makes a lot of sense alongside this DLC with things like the Thunder Barge, because it also might have, like, cannons on the side of it, which fire opponents out from its flanks. Yeah. It'd essentially just be a giant steam tank, though. So moving on to the Dwarves units, though, if we pick the Marienburg land ship up into the air like a sky junk, that's essentially the Thunder Barge. So this could potentially be a mount option as well, but it would just be a powerhouse, you know, firing maybe some great cannon off the front or like a crank gun or who knows. But then it also can fire cannons from its flank, which you maybe wouldn't aim, but would just go off themselves, or maybe it's like a bound ability. And then they should probably be pretty susceptible to like missile attacks, but they can't ever land, so ground units would be able to hurt them. But for they actually should be pretty decent on taking on flying units, maybe with some sort of like steam self-attack or like a self-explosion, or like guys on the deck throw grenades out at flying units or something to that effect, because they're built to take on dragons, so they should be decent at anti-air as well. Air-to-air missiles, so to speak. Moving on to the Goblin Hewer. Oh, Thunder Barge should also be like the Toad Dragon and Dreadsaurian, in where they are very limited in how many you can recruit. Maybe the Marienburg land ship should be on that boat too. Or the Hellhammer cannon. I don't know. I digress. Goblin Hewer. So this would be Slayer Crude Artillery. So it'd be fast for a dwarf, because Slayer Crude. And it would just be spitting out axes, like full-sized axes, at a rapid rate. So this would be excellent at flanking the enemy infantry and just mowing them down. And it could potentially even be a mount option for Malachi. So miners with steam drills. I don't think you need to go too crazy with these. It's just a reskin of warp grinders. But on the other hand, having some sort of ability where they could like, you could click a place on the map and they'd essentially disappear for a second and then appear at that other location, like on the other side of a wall, would be cool. I mean, they should have the wall breaker rule anyways with their steam drills, but I digress. Crank gunners, again, don't go too hard. It's basically the rattling guns. And you know, maybe if Grim Berlixen has like a workshop mechanic similar to Icket, because I very much feel like the dwarves need to look at Icket Claw, his DLC, The Prophet and the Warlock, and just do that for the dwarves, essentially. Just give Grim Berlixen a workshop mechanic. And in that, you know, you can give crank gunners like the endless drum ability or something. But yeah, they'd be rattling guns. Dwarves. A dwarf version. They're more proficient than the Skaven, so, you know, maybe they should be a little better than rattling guns in some way. Juggernauts. So, whether this would be, again, like an artillery chariot, like similar to war wagons, or a single entity similar to the steam tank, I just really think the dwarves deserve a ground war machine, you know, that answers the steam tank or the Skaven's Doom Wheel or Doom Flayers, or the Chaos Dwarves, Iron Demon, or Skullcracker. I think dwarves just need an answer to that. That would be the Juggernaut. And then lastly, Grudrakers are, you know, Grim Berlixen has a Grudraker. He invented it, I believe. So just having Grudge Rakers as a unit almost feels like an auto-include, but I've made them the bonus because they're essentially a reskin of like several other units, so I almost feel like it should just be FLC, you know? But yeah, that's my entirety of all those thoughts, putting it in the most concise way possible. And then, you know, we will soon begin to unravel what CIA has in store for us for the Thrones of Decay, actually. But I would be surprised if it was... I think this is going to be pretty accurate for the most part. For the FLC Lord, I really hope it is the Empire, because we really need more Empire Lords. We're so lacking, in my opinion. Boris Todbringer should come with a Mid-Inland DLC. So, Marius Lightdorf makes the most sense, in my opinion. Check out the video in the top right to see a grand vision I have for him versus Halflings as an FLC. So, anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you again next time. I have a much bigger video on the way. So, stay tuned. Bye-bye.